Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 662, and today's date is May 8th, 2015, and the title of this episode is The Economic Recovery is Pure Propaganda. Prepare for the Collapse. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. The interview with James Corbett is now on the X22 Report Spotlight channel. If you are on the email system, you should have gotten an email alert. If you're subscribed to YouTube, you should have received an email from YouTube. If you're not on either of these, you can just type in X22 Report Spotlight and it will bring you right to the channel, or you can come to the x22report.com site. On the right-hand side, I have the latest interviews in the sidebar. And just a reminder, on Sunday, I will be posting another interview, and this will be with Bill Halter. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece has additional payments coming due, and they're going to be searching everywhere for the funds. Because right now, Greece, basically, they're broke. They've been raiding the pension system. They've been implementing capital controls, keeping the people's money inside the bank. If you want to take it out, you are taxed. And they also brought up the World War II reparations, where they're saying, back in World War II, Germany borrowed a certain number of dollars and they owe Greece this money. Now, Russia is out there saying they will help Greece in their investigation. They're going to give them access to previously unused archives, and they're going to help them research this. They're going to go through the archives, the photographs, the documentary footage to put together a case where they can prove that Germany does owe the money and they never repaid it. And if they do prove this, what it means is the dollar amount is much more than what they owe Germany, or the ECB, I should say. Now, we understand that Greece is looking at Russia. They signed deals for the Turkish Stream pipeline. And it seems that the United States government central bankers, they are pushing Greece not to abandon the Western-backed Trans-Adriatic pipeline. They're saying, don't stop that and go with the Turkish stream. Stay with us. Stay with the United States. Stay with the Eurozone. But as we can see, Russia right now is going to help them pay for it. They're going to spur economic growth. And of course, the United States is out there saying the Turkish Stream doesn't even exist. They're not even planning on building it yet. But construction started already on the Turkish pipeline. It's going to be finished in about a year and a half. And Greece right now, Russia, during a phone conversation with Tsipras and Putin said they're ready to consider providing financial support for Greek companies that join the Russian pipeline project. So they're already going to hand out funds to them to entice them in. And we can see right now, Greece seems to be basically slanted more towards Russia than it is to Europe, the IMF, United States, because what have all these central bank bodies done for Greece? They've put them into debt, further into debt. They had them implement austerity. People lost their jobs. People had no way of making incomes. The country is in a collapse situation. Where were they going back to 2008? They were just giving them debt. They weren't helping them build the country. They were putting them into debt to steal their natural resources. That's what they've been doing. Now, all of a sudden, Russia's stepping in, the BRICS system's stepping in, and they're saying, whoa, just a minute here. And we can see right now they're becoming desperate at this point in time. Now, here in the United States, what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing the propaganda machine. It is in overdrive. They are trying to convince us that everything is fine. We are in a major recovery. And what are we seeing? We are not. But of course, they're putting out their numbers, trying to convince us that we are. April payrolls came in at 223,000, a tiny 5,000 below the 228 that was expected. March payroll was revised even lower to just about 85,000, the weakest since June 2012, and pushing the 3-month average job gain to under 200,000. And of course, the unemployment rate has come down from 5.5% to 5.4%. Everything is just fine. We are in a recovery. Everyone has a job. Stores aren't closing. Real estate's booming. The auto industry is booming. Everything is fine. Except everything that we've been looking at is completely the opposite of what they're talking about. How can this be? Again, like I said yesterday in the report, someone is lying. We looked at the Challenger Gray Christmas numbers, and they told us that the oil and gas states, they've lost jobs, about 22,000 or so, around that number. The BLS looked at it and said, oh, we only see 3,000. What happened to the other jobs? Where did they go? And they've done this time and time again. So basically, they're just leaving those people who lost their job out of the equation. Just like those people who have fallen off, they just leave them out. But when we look at these numbers and we delve deeper into it, what do we see? Well, as of April 2015, the number of full-time jobs remain well below the pre-recession peak, which incidentally was hit on December 2007. The month the last recession officially started, the number of part-time jobs surging by nearly 500,000, the worst since last June, while the number of full-time jobs tumbled by 252,000, also the biggest drop in nearly a year. So who is getting all these jobs? I mean, they're telling us that the unemployment rate is at 5.4% now. They're telling us everything is fine, everyone's getting a job. But when we really look at this, what do we see? We see the jobs are going to part-time work. 400,000 part-time jobs. I mean, several years ago, Obama unveiled a manufacturing initiative in which he promised to do everything in his power to boost the U.S. manufacturing sector. We added 1,000 manufacturing jobs, following 0 manufacturing jobs just last month. So we understand that manufacturing is going absolutely nowhere. Why is this? Well, we do understand that the Baltic Dry Index is around 540-something points. We realize that the consumer right now is not purchasing, and since the consumers are not purchasing, manufacturing, they're not producing, which means companies are going to be laying off more and more people, and they don't need the raw material. And most of the manufacturing jobs have been sent offshore, away from the United States. So if we put this into perspective, for every manufacturing job added in April, there were 26 new waiters and bartenders. Since 2007 of December, there have been 1.4 million manufacturing jobs lost. There have been almost completely an offset by 1.3 million waiter and bartender jobs gained. So we are a part-time nation. That is what we are today. And we can see right now, a nation that is a part-time nation cannot survive. It is impossible. We see the college graduates that are coming out of school. They can't find work. They're taking part-time jobs. We see the older population where they're getting 0% on their retirement. Inflation is hitting the supermarkets where food is continually going up, and they're finding it very hard to survive. Virtually all job gains have gone to older workers, those 55 and over, and those who are very close to retirement. I mean, if we look at the prime career years, those age 25 to 54, they've declined, this time by 19,000 in the month of April. How is this system going to survive? It isn't. This is why we see retail stores closing. People do not have the disposable income. They can't make it. The real estate industry, the housing market, The only thing that's propping this up is the free money from the Fed, investment, hedge funds pumping in cash and purchasing the homes. The everyday American is not out there taking out a mortgage. This is why we've seen mortgage companies laying off thousands upon thousands of people. Go onto the internet, do a search, go back to 2013. Do a search and go forward and look up how many jobs were lost in the mortgage industry. You will see thousands upon thousands, especially in JP Morgan. You see it in Citibank, you see it in Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and many of the smaller mortgage companies. Because they knew the Americans are tapped out. They knew that they're not going to come in and purchase a home. This is why they're starting all the draconian programs, to bring these people in. But it's not going to work. It hasn't worked whatsoever. Actually, if we look at the wage growth, it's going nowhere. I mean, the wages are not keeping up with inflation. Even though they tell us there is no inflation, well, I'm sorry. When I go to the supermarket, I see fresh food continually going up every single day. So we can see right now the wage growth basically has been flat for the last 6 years. Wages are not only not rising or even flat, but for the past year have been declining at a rapid pace after hitting a 2.5% in early 2014. There is no wage growth for more than 4 out of every 5 workers. And of course, they're out there convincing us, yes, people have jobs. And those people who are not working, it's because they don't want to work. Well, the number of Americans not in the labor force, it rose once again to 93,194,000 from 93,175,000. With the result being a participation rate of 69.45, or just above the lowest percentage since 1977. So basically, these people who are being laid off from all these companies, and we discuss the layoffs many, many times, and we're adding them all up, and we're starting to see that these people really cannot find work. So what they're doing is they're manipulating the jobless claims to make it look like, oh, all these people are getting laid off. No one's applying for jobless claims, so they must have work someplace. Those people who can't find jobs, who haven't been on an interview in 4 weeks, they're just not counted. Those people who do not meet a certain number of hours or get a certain number of dollars in a part-time job, they're just not counted. But what's very interesting is that they are counted if they have a part-time job as a full-time job. So if you have a part-time job, you're counted as full-time. If you lose that part-time job, you're just not counted unless you're making a certain number of dollars and working at a certain number of hours. The whole entire thing is propaganda. It's an illusion to convince everyone that we are in this recovery, and we are not. Things are falling apart at a rapid pace, and this is why they're continually bringing down the unemployment rate. They need to convince you, because as we move into this summer, when Congress goes on their vacation, we know what's going to happen. We can see it. It's coming. We understand in July, Jade Helm will start in 9 states. I think 1 state bowed out. We understand they're training, of course now it's out on the corporate media, but they've been doing this all along. They're training the Free Syrian Army, which is one and the same. They're making their move and bombing in Yemen. They're getting ready for a major offensive in Ukraine. They're bringing in military assets, lethal weapons. Trainers are already there. So we have training in the Middle East. We have training in Ukraine. We have Jade Helm here. We have NORAD spending millions refurbishing Cheyenne Mountain. We understand the Treasury is going to keep cash on hand just in case there's a natural disaster or an economic downturn. And they're going to do this for 1 year. So we know they are definitely planning some type of an event, some type of false flag. We've seen them botch a false flag down in Texas with the Islamic State. Now they're telling us that they're all over the country. We can't keep track of them. And they're planning on something big. This is all coming to a head. The whole thing is getting ready to collapse, and they understand this. And they're doing whatever they possibly can to provoke war, to provoke another country, to create an event, to take all eyes off of the central banking system, the U.S. government, to blame it somewhere else. And this is what they're doing. We see countries out there, like Japan. The Asian Development Bank is ready to cooperate with China's planned Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So they're ready to cooperate. The U.S. is saying, you know what? No, we don't want to join. We don't have anything to do with it. Now, this doesn't mean Japan joined. They're going to cooperate. Now, Japan's national debt has hit 1 quintillion yen. I mean, think about this for a second. That's 18 zeros. It's bigger than quadrillion. It's bigger than a trillion. They can never pay this off. Actually, the U.S. can't even pay off the trillion. This is an amount of debt that is completely unsustainable. You cannot sustain a country on 1 quintillion. It's impossible. But of course, they're all out there, and they'd let us know that, no, everything is fine. All this debt is good. Well, yeah, it's good for the central bank, because all the countries have to pay it back, and the people have to work for it to pay it back. And it's impossible to pay back. We've been under this system for how many years now? Since 1913? It was restarted many times. Bretton Woods, back in the 70s, the petrodollar. It can't work anymore. The entire world is drowning in debt, and they realize it. And this is why they're trying to provoke war with Russia, with China. This is why they're placing sanctions on these countries. I mean, Russia and China right now, they're making deals with each other and all the other countries around the world. Sanctions against Russia, their electronic industry, doesn't even make any sense anymore, because they've joined with China. They've launched a cooperation deal with their electronic industry. So the sanctions that the United States imposed on them is absolutely meaningless. And they made this deal, and they're not using the dollar whatsoever. They're just bypassing everything. Actually, the sanctions that the United States government central bankers place on all these countries are obsolete today. Countries don't care. They get around it. And as more and more countries dump the dollar and just use their currencies or another country's currencies, they completely bypass it. They are completely meaningless. We see Russia and China right now. They have signed a decree on cooperation in tying the development of the Eurasian Economic Union with Silk Road Economic Project. The integration of the Eurasian Economic Union and Silk Road projects means reaching a new level of partnership and actually implies a common economic space on the continent. China will invest about $5.8 billion in the construction of the Moscow-Kazakhstan high-speed railway. The railway is going to be extended into China, connecting the two countries through Kazakhstan. It can become part of the route of the new Silk Road project, which is aimed at tying China with European and Middle Eastern markets. The total cost of all this is going to be $21.4 billion. Again, they're getting ready for a new system. Now, I'm not saying that this new system is the answer to everything. Actually, most likely it isn't. Most likely it's tied into the central bankers in some way, because they're trying to reset the system. Now, we do have a competing thing. We have the U.S. government, the private Western Central Bank, and then we have the new system starting up here. And of course, the government officials who've been maintaining all of this, they don't want to let this go. They like the free ride. They like the free money printing. They like what they have right now. They don't want this to disappear, and they will go down fighting to the very end to keep it. But again, the higher level central banks, They don't care. They have no allegiance to anybody. They don't care what country it is. They have no allegiance to a country or to a people. The allegiance is to themselves. And they realize the system's coming down. And to usher in a new system, they need war. Because after the war, guess what? Everyone needs to rebuild. The population is decreased. And the central bank steps in once again and says, hey, we can help here. We can loan you the money. Of course, at interest. And we can help you rebuild everything. But again, we're going to run into the same problem. We need to get the central bank out of this. We need the government of each one of the countries to create the money without interest so the people aren't on the hook. So you can pay down the debt. And there will be a time where we all have to stand up and say, no more. We're done with this. We're sick and tired of what is going on here. And we're not going to do it anymore. Now, we all understand, since all the private Western central bank countries are in a huge amount of debt, they have to raise revenue, because even though the interest rates are at zero, they're continually borrowing. And if these interest rates creep up just a little bit, the revenue will not cover the interest payments. It just will not cover it whatsoever. They won't be able to support the debt. And this is why we see them implementing so many different taxes. Like in Japan, they implemented the sales tax. And of course, their sales on retail completely plummeted. Here in the United States, we see Obamacare, which is a complete tax. We see FATCA. We're also seeing the U.S. government central bankers pushing climate change, human-caused climate change. And of course, humans really don't and can't change the climate like they're saying. A lot of the numbers are fixed. A lot of the numbers are skewed to make everyone believe that, oh, humans are the cause of this. Of course, they went from global warming to climate change. And of course, the climate is always changing depending on the sun and other elements. And we can see they're pushing their agenda. Of course, they would like to implement a carbon tax and basically tax everyone around the world. And we see in Australia, the Australian Prime Minister's chief business advisor says that climate change is a ruse led by the United Nations to create a new world order under the agency's control. Maurice Newman, chairman of the Prime Minister Tony Abbott's Business Advisory Council, said that the UN is using false models which show sustained temperature increases because it wants to end democracy and impose authoritarian rule. It is a well-kept secret, but 95% of the climate models, we are told, prove the link between human CO2 emissions and catastrophic global warming have been found after nearly 2 decades of temperature stasis to be in error. They were doing this on purpose. The real agenda is concentrated political authority. Global warming is the hook. And this is what they're trying to push on the everyday person, to make them believe that, you are responsible. Now again, we have to look at this whole entire situation. They manipulate the GDP numbers. They manipulate unemployment. They create false flags. Why in the world would we believe them now? Why? Because they have men in white coats telling us that this is what it is. Well, their information is based on computer models that they've created. And a lot of these scientists get grants from the government to do what they want them to do. And when another scientist looked at the raw information, they found out, the temperatures are actually going the opposite way. I mean, if we look at this winter and last winter, it's been the warmest winter. No, it's been the coldest, the snowiest. Their models are based on false information that they fed into it. It's almost like when they came out and said the swine flu, there's going to be millions upon millions of people who are going to be infected. Ebola, millions upon millions of people are going to be infected in 6 months. What happened? Nothing. So we can see they are continually lying to us. And it won't stop, because this is what they do. They continually lie, and if any other information comes out, they just continue with the lie to meet their agenda. They hide what was really in Obamacare from us. They hide what's in the Trans-Pacific Partnership from the people, because they're lying about everything. They lied to us when they said, oh, we're not spying on the American people. And of course, Eric Snowden had to come out and say, yeah, they are. And all of a sudden, they had to come clean and say, okay, we are spying, but we're using Section 215 from the Patriot Act, and that gives us permission. No, it doesn't. The Fourth Amendment does not give you permission to do this. And of course, what happened was judges came out and said it was unconstitutional. But again, this is meaningless, because they don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about the rights. They're going to continue with the spying program. Of course, they're going to create more laws, and laws on top of that, to tell you that, yes, it's all legal, and this is the reason why we're able to do this. John McCain is out there, and he's going to introduce a bill for Arizona that would allow Customs and Border Protections access to federal lands for security activities. Seems like he's up to something, because every time they push out a bill, it's never for what you think it is. It's always something that's the opposite. And he has co-sponsors on this bill, like Matt Salmon, from a Republican from Arizona, said that, yes, the laws that will be put into place to protect these lands also prevent Border Patrol agents from doing their jobs, and the legislation, the Arizona Borderland Protection and Preservation Act, SB 70, would cut unnecessary red tape and enable Border Patrol agents to have access to all federally managed land in southwest Arizona, so they can perform their jobs effectively, keep our communities safe, and secure the border once and for all. The change would allow the Border Patrol to roam on 10 million acres of federal lands and parks in Arizona and California, and even construct radio towers in areas where no development is currently allowed. Now, we understand all these parks and all these lands, they're collateral to other countries for the debt. And we can see at this point in time, they're going to be placing government officials on these lands, setting up towers to protect the lands, because eventually what they're going to try to do is say, okay, we owe this debt, our system collapsed, well, here is your collateral. But guess what? The American people, we did not agree on this. And this is the real reason why they took the land in the United States and said, oh, this is a nature preserve. No, what they're doing is saying, okay, this piece of land, that's collateral for the debt. And now they want to guard this land that's owed to another country. And we can see this is the real reason why they're doing this. In Africa, in Liberia, they're saying that Liberia is going to be Ebola free. And the World Health Organization is going to announce this tomorrow. But what's very interesting, a lot of the soldiers from the U.S. came home from Liberia, but they're keeping a contingent of soldiers in Liberia. Coming from the Army Colonel, he's saying that our deployment is open-ended. We're not leaving just yet. Well, that's very interesting. I thought they were down there to rid the country of Ebola. Well, if they've done their job, they should just pack up and leave. Why aren't they leaving? Well, we have to remember Liberia, Nigeria, Senegal, all these different countries, they have a huge amount of oil and natural gas. And they've been setting up private companies in these countries to help out. And we have to remember China is also in these countries. So we can see right now this wasn't really for Ebola. This was a ruse to bring the troops in and get closer to the governments in that country. And the troops now are not leaving, and they are staying in these countries. Now, out in Ukraine, we see they have an economic blockade on the southeastern section of Ukraine. And what they've been doing, and I'm talking about the Kiev government, the U.S.-backed puppet government, they've been destroying gas pipelines. We reported on this, where a lot of the shells hit a gas pipeline. They've been hitting cafe buildings, hospitals, and many different areas inside of Donbass, and they're trying to destroy their economy in this region, cut them off, make them suffer. The economic blockade, it hasn't been lifted. The banking system has not been restored. Pensions and social payments are not paid. Furthermore, there is no constitutional reform, even though Ukraine says that something is being done. All issues related to local elections are not coordinated with representatives with DPR or LPR, that's Donetsk and Lugansk. And no one coordinates with the officials of these areas. The Minsk agreement is basically violated. They're talking, and none of this has been done. So what we're seeing right now is they're not looking to fulfill any of this. Why? Because the US, UK, Poland, France, they're all in there. They're training. They're getting ready. They're bringing defensive weapons, lethal weapons, to get ready for a major offensive. And it is coming. The U.S. right now just allocated $25 million to bolster the Ukrainian army. More and more funds are coming into Ukraine to help out with this offensive. And we know it's already been voted on that they can supply them with lethal weapons. And we understand they've been getting all these lethal weapons for some time now. This is nothing new. Now it's just out in the open. That's all that means. Now we all understand, and this is going back during the first coup d'etat in Ukraine, that most of the information that comes out is complete propaganda made up by the United States government, Ukraine, UK, and all the other private Western Central Bank countries. And what's very interesting is the U.S. Permanent Representative to NATO, Douglas Lute, has admitted that his knowledge about the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine comes mostly from social networks rather than intelligence reports. And he's not talking about the alternative media or the new media. He's talking about the social media of his colleagues, like other NATO officials or the Kiev government that basically tweet different information. This is where he's getting his information. And we understand that this information is pure propaganda. I mean, remember when the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, he claimed that Russian military were continuing to expand their presence in eastern Ukraine, and then he posted a picture. It was a 2-year-old picture of an air defense system from an air show near Moscow. We had NATO posting satellite pictures, which were black and white, fuzzy, which were photoshopped, that turned out that they were from a year ago of Russia doing military training near Ukraine. All of this is propaganda, and this is where our supposed leaders are getting their information from other propaganda sources. Maybe they should look towards the alternative media and the new media, and they get the real information. But it seems like this entire thing is completely infested with morons. And they're trying to make sense of what's going on by pushing out propaganda that they heard and trying to convince the people that, yes, this is our intelligence. It's just unbelievable what is going on here today. Now, we understand in Yemen, the situation continually gets worse. The people of Yemen are rising up. They're fighting back. Of course, Saudi Arabia, which is orchestrated by the United States, where they're the puppet masters and they're telling Saudi Arabia what to do. They're invading another country. They're bombing a country that never attacked Saudi Arabia. I mean, if we just switch this around and we bring it back to World War II and we said, Germany now is bombing Yemen, they're getting ready to invade, the whole situation would be different. Even if we just had Russia. If it came out in the U.S. corporate media that Russia decided to bomb Yemen, they're mounting forces on the border, what would our leaders say? They'd be like, this is an act of war. This cannot happen. But it's amazing that no one says a word if the United States government pushes Saudi Arabia as their proxy army to invade Yemen, because this is what's happening here. And in Iran, they're having rallies against the bombing of Yemen. And it seems like 700 Iranian cities are going to be included in this rally to stop the bombing and to promote peace. And we can see right now, and this is coming from Gerald Celente, which he brought up a very good point, that most of the people inside Saudi Arabia who are helping with the oil fields are Yemenis. So they could see an uprising in their country. There are over 4 million Yemenis in Saudi Arabia. And if they continually attack Yemen and it gets worse and there's a ground invasion, things are really going to start going downhill worse than they are right now. And Saudi Arabia right now, under the rule of the United States, is basically giving the Yemeni people an ultimatum, because they're saying, we will bomb the stronghold area of where you captured the area where President Hadi held out. And they're saying they want the people to leave. They're dropping leaflets now saying, listen, if you stay, you will get hurt. We are going to bomb this area. And what did they do? Well, they went in and they completely bombed that area. At the same time, they were talking about a ceasefire for humanitarian purposes. So they're bombing, they intensified the bombing, and they're talking about a ceasefire. But we can see the Yemeni people, they are becoming closer and closer together. The warring sides between the Houthis, the people who are loyal to Salah, the people who are in the other different tribes, they're coming together now, and they're forming a truce, and they're saying this is a war on our country. So what's happening now, the people are coming together. What the United States and Saudi Arabia are doing right now, they're bringing the people together in Yemen, and now it's going to be even harder to overthrow Yemen. And we can see that the United States and Saudi Arabia have a date set for a pause in the fighting, and that's May 12th. They didn't work with the Houthis. They didn't say, let's get together and talk about peace. Basically, they said, we're going to have a 5-day humanitarian pause. And these are the conditions. So basically, they just stopped bombing on their own, which they could have done at any time. When Russia, China, the UN said, listen, slow down, let's get humanitarian aid in there, they could have just stopped the bombing. But it looks like the world is looking at this saying, wow, you're continually bombing and the people are suffering. And of course, the United States is looking around going, okay, you know what, let's just slow this down a little bit, and let's just have a 5-day timeout right now so we can bring in some aid to the country. And of course, one of the conditions is the Houthis, the people of Yemen, cannot move around, they cannot reposition, and of course they can't shoot. Well, we know why they're doing this, because they need some time to reposition more satellites, to find out where they are. They don't want them to move, so they know exactly where to bomb 5 days later. And if they do move their position, they're going to say, they're in violation of the ceasefire, but they never agreed to the ceasefire. They never had a sit-down. The United States government, the central bankers, just decided, we're just going to stop bombing to appease the other countries and say, yeah, see, we're bringing in humanitarian aid. So all of this is a bunch of baloney. They are not going to stop until they get what they want, just like in Ukraine, just like in Iraq, in Syria, Iran. They have a goal, and they will not stop until they reach it. And we understand that the United States government sold Saudi Arabia cluster bombs. And following a report on Sunday, which we mentioned before, the Human Rights Watch said they have a video and photograph evidence showing that Saudi Arabia used cluster bombs near villages, which really is illegal. Of course, the United States and Saudi Arabia never signed the cluster munitions against civilians. Only 116 other countries did. And this was back in 2008. And of course, the United States is saying, we'll look into this. You know they're never going to look into this. Basically, what's happening, they're going to use whatever they possibly can to get back into that country. Just like they had the Kiev government using white phosphorus in the southeastern people. Just like Israel uses white phosphorus on the Palestinians in Gaza, which is completely illegal. It burns right through the skin if you're hit, and it doesn't stop. We see the United States is out there right now, and they're very concerned about China, about their cyber attacking abilities. The U.S. is voicing concern over a report that China manipulated internet traffic intended for a major Chinese web service company and used it for a cyber attack on U.S. sites. State Department spokesman Jeff Rathke basically said that the report said that they hit greatfire.org, an anti-online censorship group. The group maintains that the Chinese authorities carried out a denial-of-service attack, shutting down the site for a short period of time. And you have to remember, we have CISFA pending in the Congress. We have the Patriot Act, which is going to expire. And again, this is part of the agenda, and they're continually pushing their agenda. Again, an advanced state actor will bounce the attacks off of many different servers. They're not going to have the attack come from their country. It will be bounced off many different servers, and it is very, very difficult to track this back. And they have no real evidence. They never do. The Islamic State right now is still pushing the propaganda, and of course, there really isn't Islamic State. It's a proxy army. It's created by the CIA, Mossad, UK, and other nations. And it's used in various countries to make people do the things the government would like them to do. And now they're pushing fear here in the United States. And you have to remember, again, the Patriot Act does expire come June 1st, Section 215. And of course, they have the U.S. Freedom Act. And they're trying to get something passed right now. And they're building upon this for the main event. They're saying that security conditions at U.S. military bases were raised Thursday night because of a growing concern of jihadist threat in the U.S. The move comes hours after FBI Director Comey told reporters that there are thousands of the Islamic State, also known as Daesh, all over the United States, and people following them online. But every time they show us some type of incident, it's always patsies that they set up. So they really have no proof for this, but they are telling us, and analysts are out there telling us, that the terrorist group is sufficiently wealthy and has enough social media savvy that if unchecked, could execute a 9/11 scale attack, or even worse, in the U.S. They are preparing for the main event. This is all they're doing. Everything's been set up. They've been pre-positioned. When they get the green light, it will be a go, just like 9/11, just like the Boston bombing, just like the Texas shooting, just like the terrorism in Canada, Australia, France, Belgium. It is the same thing. Now they're just ramping it up. They're getting ready because the entire system is collapsing. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.